Hey everybody, welcome to Ramblings from the Warp. I'm joined again by Kyle and Christian. Say hi to everybody.
What up, boys and girls and days and dims?
How you doing, fellas?
So today we're going to cover a topic that I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone else do. And this is going to be kind of fun because I was so hoping when I got into Heresy that somebody was going to have this information, and no one ever does. This is one of those untouched gems that if more people knew about it, they would know where to start. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through all of the legions. Now, I'm going to do a broad strokes of storyline where it's fitted to explain some of the characters and how their dynamics work, but we're going to break down the legions. And I'm going to explain a little bit about their story and how it trends into the game, like how it actually works gameplay wise, so that you get a flavor of what each legion is. Because that's the biggest question that most players are going to have coming into this is, hey, what legion should I play? Well, it depends on what you want to play. What's your flavor? Do you like to hit stuff with a stick? Do you want to blow something up from afar? Do you want to do questionably ambiguously sexual stuff? All of these are options in Horus Heresy. So we're going to cover that. And while we're going through, we're going to shoot some questions back and forth where we need some fill in because there's going to be a lot to cover. We're going to try and knock out all the loyalists. We're going to go in order. And I'm only going to focus on characters that have actual playable rules in the game. There are tons of characters in the lore, and I have no problem going back later and fleshing that out if you guys want to hear that. But we're going to focus only on what's in gameplay right now, what affects its gameplay, and how that ties into its story. So you guys kind of get an idea of how each legion plays. So before I start, we're going to go in order. We're going to do only the loyalists in this episode. We'll do a traitor episode next. If you have any additional questions, feel free to put those in the Discord. Feel free to shoot us a message, whatever else it is. I'm open to cover any topics as long as Kyle and Christian are on board. With that, you boys ready to start?
Yes, sir. Just also want to mention that we are going to go over all the legions again once 3.0 drops, and we're going to give y'all more backstory, more lore, everything to go with it. Yes.
Yeah, we're really going to focus right now as to how their flavor is, how they play. And then when 3.0 drops, I plan on going through and doing in-depth analysis of each individual legion
Yes,
to
sir.
see what changed from 2.0 to 3.0, what we're excited about, potentially what was a bummer, because there could be a couple of things where you're like, man, they took away my guy's ability to hit somebody with a hammer and yeet them into space. So, all right, well, to kick it off, we're going to start with the first legion. This is Dark Angels. Dark Angels have a lot of fanboys because they're the first. They're the first legion ever. The Dark Angels hail from a planet called Caliban, and Caliban is basically Knights of the Round Table pre-heresy. Before the Emperor shows up, they're literally just night houses that are hunting beasts in the forest. That's why a lot of the things that you see in the Dark Angels that we're going to go over are tied into those night houses. The Primarch of the Dark Angels is the Lion. His full name is Lion L. Johnson. Super original. He was found as a child in the woods, and he got the name Lion because he killed the Calvinite lion, and they found him with the corpse. The Lion is very, very, very good in close combat. He has turned the Dark Angels essentially into masters of war to a degree where it's complete obliteration when they're involved. Like, there's not a lot of times where like the Dark Angels show up, they fight a really well held battle, and afterwards they're like, okay, surrender sidearms or whatever. Like, that's not their style. The Dark Angels operate in wings. There are 6 wings. There's the Death Wing, the Raven Wing, the Dread Wing, the Fire Wing, and the Iron Wing. And there's also one called the Storm Wing. Now, things to know is each one of these have their own specialization in what they do and how they operate. The Death Wing kind of carry over into the Warhammer 40k universe that we see now. They're basically Terminators that are in the Heresy universe. They're bodyguards, and they carry a lot of secrets, and they actually translate to that in the game. So you can take a lot of Deathwing units as retinues or unit attachments and things like that. They have a lot of those units, and I'll talk about those units as well. There's a lot of those that are, retinues, or they can attach to characters, and they can do cool things like that. You have the Raven Wing, which is all speed, no calm, lots of bikes, lots of speeders, flyers. That's their thing. That the Raven Wing is all about being fast. The Dreadwing, their nickname are called like they have an LT called the Dreadbringer. If the Dreadwing shows up, no one survives. These guys, their main jam is to use war crimes. Phosphex, rad grenades, vortex grenades. They are unchained, menacing violence with scorched earth policy. Then you have the Fire Wing. Complete 360. These guys are duelists. They would actually seek out and infiltrate to go find, specific parts of a command structure in a battle. So they could target just the command structure and like do like duels and such with them. Uh, this is one of the wings that did not make it out of the heresy. It was dissolved after the heresy. You have the Iron Wing, which was your dreadnoughts, your vehicles, your artillery. These are your heavy sluggers. These are your, the guns never tire kind of thing. The last wing was the Storm Wing. The Storm Wing is your core infantry. This is your tactical squads, your support squads. This is the meat and potatoes of the Legion. They're very well battle drilled. They're very well taught. Very, very good at what they do. Before I start getting into units and characters, any questions about the wings?
Yeah,
So what?
which one was
Oh,
it that you said got disbanded
The Fire Wing.
and why?
Uh, it, it just wasn't used as often. So when the heresy went on further and further, it became more of Deathwing to keep the secrets, Raven Wing because they served an amazing battlefield premise. The Dreadwing in the heresy was like one of the main things, and I'm going to get into one of their guys, Marduk Sadris. We'll get into him, but the Dreadwing just was so good in the heresy because you don't kill Space Marines, all the horrible stuff. It's kind of like, how do you kill, a tank with a really big round? Cool. They brought all the worst rounds. Phosphex is basically liquid flame. It's horrifying. Rad grenades are exactly what they sound like. Vortex grenades were horrifying. And that was their main thing. So they were very prevalent. The Iron Wing, that's your vehicles, your infantry, your dreadnoughts, going to be a thing. And then the Storm Wing, being the main portion of the army, later became the Green Wing, essentially, is what we know it as in 40K. But there wasn't a lot of use for the Fire Wing because it's like, why are you going to go out and duel a bunch of guys randomly when you have already irradiated the planet?
so
That was
um, so not to jump around, but I just wanted to clarify for most people to understand. When you say this is the first Legion, is this the first one that was formed? Is this the first one to be found? Like they found their Primarch? What essentially for new readers is what it means to like this is the first Legion?
so. When the legions were not originally formed as legions; they were formed as the Primarch project, and the Primarchs were numbered. Later on in the heresy, you'll find out that the Emperor basically got the information to make the Primarchs from the Chaos Gods that he is constantly saying don't exist and aren't real. And they found out what he was doing, and they scattered the Primarchs. And that's when the Great Crusade happened, which was to go rescue all the Primarchs and reunite them with the Emperor. To do that, the Emperor took the gene seed, a copy of each one of the Primarchs, and made legions in their image of Space Marines. Space Marines literally have a gene seed in them that is the DNA of their Primarch. There are actually instances where you'll see where someone, was a guy like me, like, I'm 12% butter, I'm a fat dude, with a beard, I'm kind of brown. They pop in a gene seed for a Blood Angel, and they're like, somehow this guy's white with blonde hair now. They actually carry the gene seed of their Primarchs to such a degree, and they went on a crusade, and the Primarchs were reunited with their legions, and then they would do some things to reincorporate and add their own flavor to their legions and kind of sculpt them in their image. But The primarchs were actually found in completely different orders. This is just the order in which the emperor made them.
So, considering that this is the first Legion, was this one used a lot as the first? Is that why they have so many different squads that basically kind of reflect a little bit of every other Legion?
Not really. What you will find is they were used a lot in early heresy. That's why they have a lot of weapons from the Dark Age. You'll find out that Dark Angels have access to weaponry in the game that's very weapons of the Dark Age. Like other legions don't have it. Some of them carry plasma guns that are part flamer, part plasma. No one else really has that, and that's a weapons of the Dark Age of technology that isn't really used anymore. You'll find out a little bit more of that with some other units. There were a lot of legions early on that were used. Like we'll get into Death Guard and the traitor stuff. They were originally known as the Dusk Raiders. Um, a lot of the original legions, went from Terra, which is Earth, and went out. And when they found their primarchs slowly turned them into what their legions became. It wasn't where they were used one versus another versus another. They were all kind of made together, but there were some that were used in more places at once. And one of the things you're going to find out also today while we're going through all of this is early on, before the primarchs were found, legions fought together a lot. And there are even instances where certain legion units would train under other legion units. So you have some guys who are like, oh, our Terminators fight like Justarin because they studied under Justarin from the Lunar Wolves. And that caused problems with their legion when they got with their Primarch. It's very intertwined. There's going to be a lot, and I'll cover it when we get into the units. But there was no one legion per se that was more prevalent than the others. It literally was just the order that they were numbered.
Gotcha.
Now,
Well,
having said that out loud, I know that there are going to be people in the comments. They're going to be like, "Gabe's wrong, and this is why." Meh. I know that's going to be a thing. I'm just letting you know every book I've ever read, there were legions that were used for more specific functions, but they were all kind of made at the same time.
Space Marine is a Space Marine, man.
Yeah.
Until Daddy comes home and changes the rules.
Correct. Until GW retcons it. So, so getting into the characters. So the Lion, the Primarch of the Dark Angels, knock down, drag out, just he's a powerhouse. Multiple weapon profiles, very tough. What you're going to find is the Primarchs when you start to play this game. The Primarchs are kind of like bringing a hammer to a game of Pogs. It's different. They're definitely exponentially better in a lot of ways. He's fantastic in close combat. He does a lot of really cool stuff with his Legion, like gives stasis grenades and then like affects charges, affects morale. All the Primarchs really do that, but this guy is specifically, the Lion is good in close combat. There's not a lot in the game he can't kill, and that's including Titans. If you give him enough time, he can work down just about anything. The next character in the Dark Angels, his name is Corswain, which Kyle's going to feel some kind of way about this.
I hate that little bastard.
Corswain he's part of what's called the Ninth Order of the Knights that they have. There's a portion in the books where he is actually sent to strip certain places of authority. Essentially, he's very, very well regarded by the Lion. He carries a weapon called the Sword. Again, points for originality. It's given to the finest bladesmith of the Raven Wing. On the tabletop, Corswain also can hold his own against a lot in close combat. He's very good. He's very effective. He's a fantastic HQ choice. His sword does a lot of really good work. His armor is very, very good. He's a fantastic HQ, and he does what he's meant to do. He beats things up in close combat. The next model they have in their line is named Ferrith Redloss. Now, Ferrith is the Dreadwing commander. He wears an armor plate called the Dreadbringer's plate that is so good. There are instances in which he was watched walking through Phosphex and came out the other side unscathed. Literally walked through a river of Phosphex and was just like, that's cool.
Well, that's because he rolled a 6.
No, like this armor has stuff. It has some stuff from the Dark Age in it. It's one of the few things out there that whenever you shoot at him and the rounds hit the flare shield that's in his armor, essentially, it flickers purple and leaves purple trails behind, like streams and trails behind him. He's got a very special set of armor. He became the first Grand Master of the Dark Angels after the betrayal of Luther. For those of you who are going to read this eventually, the Dark Angels have a very weird history where one of their commanders named Luther doesn't have a model, but he caused a big schism in the middle of the Dark Angels, half sided with Luther, half sided with the Lion. Ferrith Redloss is the guy they sent to go find Luther. He's got big dad energy. The next person up, his name is Holguin. Holguin is a Deathwing commander. He wears a set of armor called the Deathbringer's Aegis. It is one of the few hybrid variants of Terminator armor. It is actually Tartarus and Cataphract Yarmor hybrid. He carries a weapon called the Viridian Blade. It was made specifically to hunt and kill beasts on Caliban, and it is very good at killing big stuff in the game because of that. In-game, it gets benefits against killing large models, vehicles, dreadnoughts, automata, things like that. It does get a bonus for that. The next person on this list is probably my favorite Dark Angels character, but not because he himself is anything specifically awesome, but because of the story of his sword, and it's horrifying. So, Marduk Sadris is a Dreadwing commander. He was the person who oversaw the Eschaton incident. Marduk Sadris' job as the Dreadwing commander, doing what he does, is he oversees the final death or extermination of an entire world or species. When I said that the Dreadwing are war crimes to the nth degree, this guy has literally shown up before and been like, this world is no more, raise it to the bottom of the earth, like raise it to nothing, kill everything. Nothing survives, eradicate everything, extinction level event. If this guy shows up and says so, it's an extinction level event. To rub salt in the wound, he carries a weapon called the Death of Worlds. The Death of Worlds was originally formed from adamantium particulates that were collected from the first dead planet of the Eschaton incident, and they forged it into a sword. Every time he goes and declares essentially another extinction level event, they gather more soil from that planet and they forge an extension onto the sword.
So
A
how
little
big is
much,
this
don't you
sword?
think?
It's a little extra, right? But it has a really cool rule. If I remember correctly, its rule is whenever you take invul saves against it, you have to re-roll the successful ones.
That sucks.
Fantastic, right? Marduk Sadris' model, it looks intense, and if you look at the model, the sword goes down, and then there's actually little chevrons of different colors that were from different planets, where they've added like 6 or 7 like wings onto this blade. This dude has killed a lot of people. He's signed the death warrant of a lot of people. Now I'm going to get into the specific special units that the
I do
Dark
have
Angels can get into. What?
one
Okay, sure.
question though.
Yeah, what do you got?
During this time, because I am also confused about this character, uh, the Lord Cipher, is that really a big thing in Heresy? Because from what
In the
okay, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Finish your question.
From my understanding, that this people say it's a person, people say it's also just a tradition passed down to like someone that knows all secrets from the Dark Angels. Is this something that's in the heresy, or is this just a 40k? Uh, I guess
No,
lore.
the Lord Cipher is a part of heresy. The Lord Cipher is a title that serves a very specific role in the Legion. And he was known to just pop up in your time of need. Like this, you'd be fighting on a battlefield and Cypher would show up and you'd be like, hey, what are you doing here? And he's like, because you were going to get your shit pushed in if I wasn't. It was a very important role. It was incredibly heavy weighted in the 30k universe in the heresy timeline. There just isn't a model for it. There are no rules for the Lord Cipher in Horus Heresy. Maybe that'll be a 3.0 thing that we see down the line. I mean,
Hopefully.
Dark Angels already have quite a bit, but yes, it lore wise, it's something I'd be more than happy to get into in like a lore episode about the Dark Angels. It is a very important office. It's a very weighty office that carries a lot of a lot of influence in the Dark Angels, but there's not a playable model for it.
Gotcha. That's just wondering that.
Yeah. So one of the first units that you want to talk about for sure are the Inner Circle. The Inner Circle are basically just cataphracti terminators. They keep all the secrets and they carry what are called tyrannic greatswords. And they also have a weapon from the weapons of the Dark Age era called plasma casters. They are wrist-mounted flamethrowers that fire plasma inside the fire. It'd be like if you made just nightmare napalm. If you can imagine like how bad napalm already is, and just dial that to 1,000,000. That's what your plasma casters are. They carry those on their wrists, and then they carry tyrannic greatswords. They're very, very strong. They're very capable, and you can take them as a retinue for some models. There is another area inside the houses where you have the Inner Circle Knights Cenobium. The Knights Cenobium are just Inner Circle that were made specifically to fight monsters, because there was a time the Dark Angels went to a planet and came across some Xenos that were just stomping Dark Angels, man. This is, keep in mind, this is before Tyranids or anything else. So like there's nothing out there that no one really has a book about, like, hey, you're gonna come across a thing with 19 legs and bitey teeth. Make sure you take the right sword. They were basically crafted after that Xenos event to fill that gap. So if you show up and you find something that resembles, like a massive Carnifex-like creature from the 40k universe, the inner Circle Knight Cenobium are the guys who are going to go out and beat the brakes off of it. The next unit are called Interemptors. War crimes and power armor. I cannot stress that enough. Their primary weapon to carry are called plasma burners. They're basically hand-carried versions of the plasma casters you saw in the Inner Circle. But they also love to use rad missiles, stasis missiles, plasma incinerators, phosphex grenades, rad grenades. They're so horrible that even the rest of their legion is like, we should give them some space. They are conveyed in the game as having a rule called bitter duty, which you're going to see with a lot of destroyer units, which I'll explain destroyer units here in a little bit as well. Bitter duty basically says an HQ can't join them, an apothecary can't join them, a tech marine can't join them. Only other models with bitter duty can join them, because whatever job they're doing, nobody else wants to be with them at all. They quite literally are the guys that are like, hey, I heard there's some people in these tunnels. That's okay. We brought phosphex bombs. Well, I don't want to go down to a cave full of phosphex. I mean, if you're a bitch, just say that. That's how they operate, right? These guys they're literally war crimes. They in game, they can take missile launchers, they can take rad grenades, they have bitter duty. They're a very, very violent unit, both in story and on tabletop. They actually do a lot of pretty violent ability.
They're the homie that over prepares and brings too much stuff, huh?
These guys are like the prepper from Tremors. They overkill. They overkill hard. The next unit is called the Firewing. The Firewing Igmatus Cabal. They're jump pack assassins. Quite literally, they're guys with jump packs that only go in to assassinate characters. In game, they have jump packs. They have a rule called Mark for Death, which before the game starts, they can pick a unit and they get reroll benefits against that unit. And once per game, they can just say, hey, we're going on an assassination run. All of our weapons gain rending for 1 turn, which is terrifying.
So from what I'm hearing, is there anything the Dark Angels don't have? They seem like they're well-rounded in units.
Okay, so there are 2 things I can tell you right off the top the Dark Angels don't have. The first is a conscience. They are free of any bad feelings about doing horrible shit to people. They do not care. They 100% will do anything they need to do to win. That is what they're about. And most of the time, it's doing horrible, horrible, heinous things. The other thing the Dark Angels don't have is they don't have a really strong, like, they don't have a strong speed presence. They have Ravenwing, but Ravenwing don't have anything special to them like the rest of the wings do. You know, the Deathwing have models in here, the Dreadwing have models in here, even the Firewing have models in here, but the Ravenwing don't really have anything special to them. They don't have things like what you're going to see the White Scar have or like the Raven Guard have. So that's the only other thing they don't really have is the Ravenwing don't have tons and tons of cool models individually, but they are kind of a jack of all trades kind of army. But their primary go-to tool set is just overbearing brutality. One of the other units, we were talking about how they have a lot of the units that can be added as retinues. They have one called Deathwing Companions. Basically, Knights of the Round Table that walk around with your HQ choice. They sword and board it. They look like old, Knights of Jerusalem style with the big crosses on their shields and the full knight armor. They are just knight bodyguard. Now we're going to get into the weird stuff about Dark Angels. They have a thing available to them called an Excendio Battle Automata. The story behind this is horrifying. Basically, what these are is there was a civil war that happened in the Imperium universe before the Horus Heresy, and it was perpetrated by AI with a group called the Iron Men, or the Men of Iron. Basically, they made robots and they gave the robots automata. They gave them AI, and that AI was, classic Skynet. You guys can't protect yourselves from yourselves, and they went on a whole thing. And the Imperium fought against them, and they immediately said, "Hey, you can't have this." And instead of calling it artificial intelligence, they call it abominable intelligence. And they said, "You guys can't have this." And the Dark Angels in classic Dark Angel faction were like, "We can if we keep it a secret."
But that's
So
heresy.
they took some of these Men of Iron and they caged them inside of an automata. And they can only be deployed by the Lion himself. He has to give the order to deploy the Excendio Battle Automata. And they are essentially just these abominable intelligence Men of Iron wrapped in a machine that he can order and control. Now, that's all of the units that are offered by the Dark Angels. So I'm going to give a quick synopsis of how each of these kind of play and how the Legion has a flavor. The flavor of the Dark Angels Legion is to control the table, essentially. A lot of their rights of war are built in the idea of controlling terrain, manipulating terrain, creating difficult terrain. They have a lot of models that are just very over the top brutal in close combat, have a lot of perks. but they don't have the same staying power that you'll see in some other legions. That's not their shtick. Their shtick is just to be over the top brutal and hoping that that tool works. Any questions before we go to the next legion?
On a scale of 1, meaning a 13-year-old who's just getting into Warhammer can pick this army up and play it, to 10, you've been playing this army for 20 years, or you've been playing this game for 20 years, now it's time to pick up Dark Angels. Where would you rank them on playability difficulty?
They're about a 7 on the difficulty scale. If you think of it in the sense of playing them to their strengths and playing them effectively, they're mildly complicated, but a lot of the complexity is kind of washed out by the sheer just overpoweredness of some of the units. There's some things in this game that are just so good on their own that you can be kind of reckless with them, and the Dark Angels fill that gap a lot. You know, you can throw Corswain into some pretty sketchy situations, and he's going to come out on top like 8 out of 10 times. You can throw, Inner Circle or even some Igmatus Cabal into some units, and they'll come out on top like 7 out of 10. The reason why I say that they're a complex army to run is most armies in current rule set only have 1 or 2 Rite of Wars. The Dark Angels have 7 that are exclusive to them. It's a rabbit hole to learn about them, but the more you learn about them, the more you fall in love with the Legion. They have a lot of flair, a lot of style, a lot of really cool things. The complexity of their rules is what makes them difficult, just because there's a lot.
The only other thing I guess I would have to go on is they have all these different, wings and companies and stuff like that. For people that don't know, I guess pre-heresy and post-heresy, what are these guys' colors? What are they known for? Like, if you're gonna have to pick up these to paint
Yep.
them, what schemes are they well known for?
Dark Angels during the Horus Heresy are black with red and silver trim. Later in the 40k universe, they transition into a forest green, and the Deathwing portions of the Dark Angels in 40k are in bone white. So if you're playing this army in Horus Heresy, it's going to be a lot of black, a lot of silver, a lot of red. In the sense of first time painting armies, I can tell you from a hobby standpoint, that's a very forgiving paint scheme. It's pretty easy to stick. It's pretty easy to paint. Unless you're following one of the online tutorials where they tell you like there's a 19 layer way to paint black, this is a very easy army to pick up and paint. It's also worth noting they have a very wide model range beyond their special models. They also have a special Contemptor, a special Leviathan. They have an individual Praetor and Terminator armor, regular Praetor. They have all of the normal things you'll see in the model line. They're a fantastic army to paint. And like I said, black with some red and silver trim, very forgiving.
Okay, well, that was the Dark Angels. Think, Gabe, now we could go to the White Scars. How are you feeling about the White Scars? What is their stitch? What do they do?
So the White Scars hail from a planet called Chagoris. Chagoris was basically a planet run on like a warlord kind of culture. And for, complete transparency, it's Mongolian culture. Lots of Mongolian war bands, lots of things like that going on. And it kind of shapes what the White Scars become. Their primarch's name is Jagatai Khan. I cannot stress this enough. The other primarchs don't see his form of combat. He himself, when he fights, they see it as more art than war. He was a very illustrious fighter, very skilled, alarmingly fast.
He never liked to show that off, though, right?
No, so this is one of the big things that you're going to see with White Scars. It's also a problem with Alpha Legion when we get to those in the traitor side. They don't talk about themselves. They don't boast. They're very humble. They're one of the most humble legions there is. They're alarmingly humble. They're also very loyal. As a matter of fact, during the Horus Heresy, Jagatai Khan was so good with everybody, and he had such a strong relationship with Horus, they were kind of worried he was going to go traitor. So there for a while, everybody was like, all right, we're waiting for the other, the other sword to drop. Is this guy going to go loyal? Is he going to go traitor? What's it going to be? He ended up going on like a little mini crusade to go find out what happened to Magnus, because Magnus was one of his very good friends. And he finds out that Magnus, went traitor, and that spurred a whole nother thing that I'm going to get into here in a little bit. But he is very, very, very good at what he does, and what he does is speed. He is the embodiment of space cavalry. The White Scars like everything to be fast. They modify their ships to be fast. They modify their jet bikes to be faster. They have a special land speeder they modified to carry heavy weapons so they could stay fast while also being well armed. The White Scars have tactics like hit and run, where they can bounce in and out of combat at will to a degree. They are 100% cavalry driven, and it's a fantastic game mechanic. It just takes a lot of skill to pull off. Jagatai Khan is one of the only models in the game that can be taken either on foot or on a jet bike. Now, we're going to get into one of the hobby downsides to Heresy, which is you have to have some creativity occasionally. Jagatai Khan only has a model on foot.
Hopefully that changes with 3.0.
Hopefully it does. But you can take him on a jet bike. You will just have to make your own kind of Primarch jet bike thing to symbolize this in the game, but you can take him on a jet bike. Now, getting into the story of the White Scars is going to be kind of crazy, because they had a very, very weird section during the Heresy where half of their legion went traitor on itself, and then the Khan came back, and they all repented, and then he made a decision and sent them out on these little penitent crusades. The first major character they have is a guy named Hibu Khan. Hibu Khan, when they went to Prospero to go see what happened to Magnus, Hibu Khan got the message about the War Master Horus and was like, hey, Horus is going traitor. We should go traitor. And other people on the ship were like, absolutely not. We're loyal to the Khan. We're going to do what the Khan wants to do. And he's like, nah, we should do what War Master Horus wants to do. And we should do this because he's the War Master. And they basically had a little civil war in their ship while the Khan was down on Prospero trying to figure out what happened to his boy Magnus. And Hibu Khan is one of the cavalry lords, the White Scar lords, that sided with Horus. When Jagatai comes back, he says, everyone who's wanted to side with Horus, come see me. And he says, take all of your people, all the guys that went traitor with you. You are to crusade into the stars. You are not to recruit more White Scars. You are not to swell your ranks. You are to crusade until all of you die. And that is your penance for going traitor against the Imperium. For our Judge Dredd fans, they basically made him do the long walk.
So I want to stop right there. Something you said, because this is something that I don't know, and hopefully the readers. Now, this could be for any legion. What do you mean by recruit White Scars? How do you recruit Space Marines
So
to your legion?
every legion had a homeworld during the Heresy, and they would pull candidates, which in 40k are called neophytes. In Horus Heresy, I think they're also called neophytes. Don't quote me on that. It's been a bit. Basically, you go to the planet, you find some kids, you ask them, hey, do you want to be a Space Marine? And they're like, boy, do I. And then you proceed to put them through what could only be considered like the terrorism of upbringings. You're pushed to the max, you're run on these different trials, and every legion has different trials. The Space Wolves have a different trial where they throw you out into the wilderness and you have to come back with a wolf pelt or some other craziness. Everyone has their own thing. So once you make it through all of that, you get your first set of augments, which is like your Laraman glands, your black carapace, your gene seed, and all that stuff. And then you actually become a White Scar or whatever legion it is. If you're told you're not allowed to recruit, or if you're not somewhere where you get viable people, there's two things that happen there. The first is when a Space Marine dies, an apothecary is there to collect their gene seed. That's the portion that makes them akin to their primarch. So that essentially means that, say I'm a first generation Space Marine, and Christian, you're a second generation, and Kyle, you're a third generation. I die. They take out my gene seed. They reuse that gene seed in Christian. That means, technically speaking, a part of me carries on. And that's how the Legion views it. They see it as, hey, our brothers we recover the gene seed, their memory will carry on, and maybe we'll get another incarnation that was as good as that one. And then when you die, it goes to Kyle, so that gene seed stays alive. So the implications of what the Khan's decree was is these guys couldn't recruit new Space Marines, which means they couldn't swell their ranks. They literally have to fight until they completely die out. The second implication of that is their gene seeds will not be salvaged, and their gene will be lost forever.
Is this something that the Emperor was okay with?
Yes, because it wasn't an Emperor decision, and to be honest, there's no book where the Emperor ever talks about it, where he's just like, hey, what'd you do with half your Legion? And the Khan was like, oh, I sent him out to go punch stars. That never got covered.
Okay.
The Legions pretty much self-manage, and one of the things you're going to learn about the Emperor when you read all the books, I can't fathom this enough for the most part, the Emperor doesn't give a shit what you do, as long as you're not messing with his grand design. He does not care. If you're out there, like, perfect evidence, we just talked about Dark Angels are out here basically being like, well, we're going to kill everybody in this generation. If anyone survives, you're going to have 5 legs, but we're going to fix the problem. Right? Emperor doesn't care. He cares if you're trampling with his plans or if you're doing something that goes against what he's trying to build. No one cared that the Khan did this. And even more importantly, the people that the Khan sent out, Hibu Khan and the rest of these guys that went out on this little splinter, they didn't care either. They saw it as, I went against my Primarch made a decree, I'm going to honor him by doing what he told me to do. And they did this without question, with all remorse, all honor, and they went out and did this. As a matter of fact, Hibu Khan, important thing to know about Horus Heresy, when you're crafting a list, you can craft your list as either loyalist or traitor for any legion you pick, with the exception of custodians when they come out, because they're not a legion. They can only be loyalist, but anything else can be loyalist or traitor. Hibu Khan is the only model in the game that can be in either a loyalist or a traitor force, because he was part of this discourse in the White Scars. He also, later in the books, linked up with the Shattered Legions while he was on his Penitent Crusade and became part of the Shattered Legions. He also is one of the models in the game that can be loyalist or traitor, and also can be part of a Shattered Legion deployment right now with the Shattered Legion rules. Really cool story, really cool background, really cool model. The next character in the White Scars that has a lot of presence and actually does have a playable rule set is Quinja. Quinja is the master of the Keshig. The Keshig are one of the elite clans in the White Scars. Quinja is kind of an outlier because he prefers Terminator plate. And he liked to talk shit to the Khan. He liked to talk shit to Jagatai. And what I mean by that is that Jagatai would be like, we should go over the mountain like this. And Quinn Zhao would be like, are you sure that's a great idea? Like he'd question him openly in front of other people.
Hmm.
And then he himself would recruit commanders in the Keshig and would tell them, question me all the time. Ask questions. Don't just blindly follow me. I want you contradicting me. I want you to call me out if you think I'm doing it wrong. Question my authority. He encouraged it. And so did Jagatai. Jagatai was like, hey, this guy's not afraid to tell me, like, hey, that seems kind of stupid. He embraced it. The next guy that the White Scars have is a guy named Solomon Khan. This dude has one of the coolest backstories that relates to the game you're ever going to hear. So Solomon Khan is the Khan of the Brotherhood of the Golden Star. That's only there in title. There is no Golden Star in the game. He was once in a battle where he was fighting alongside the Sisters of Silence, specifically with Knight Centura Merovin, and she died. And he made it a point to bring back her relics and her armor and some of the things on her to return it back to the Sisters of Silence. And the Sisters of Silence took that as such a high level of reverence and honor and respect that he paid to the sisterhood that he is one of the only people in all of the Imperium that has a private Sisters of Silence honor guard that goes with him everywhere. He legit in the game can take a squad of honor sisters. He can take a pack of Sisters of Silence in game with him because of how this writes in the story. It's pretty dope. It's pretty awesome. Those are all of the main characters in the White Scars. So any questions about those before I go into the units?
Are all of those playable?
Yes. Everybody I'm talking about, all these guys have playable rules. At
Yeah.
least in 2.0.
Right.
Yeah, everything we're going to cover in these episodes is something that is playable right now in the rules. Don't get me wrong, there are tons of main characters, that don't have rules. Games Workshop, if you're listening to this podcast, for the love of God, give me Ain and Thiel or a squad of people for my Ultramarines. I swear to Christ, I need it. Moving on.
One random question also to just put this. So you've said the Primarch can be taken on a bike. Is there any other character from the White Guards that could be taken on a bike or vehicle, or are they all on foot?
All on foot.
Sounds like a missed opportunity by GW.
I agree. But yeah, so getting into the units, there's a unit called the Dark Sons of Death. These are their destroyer squads. Every legion has destroyers, and destroyers are the guys that, again, they have that bitter duty rule where they carry all the nasty stuff, the phosphex, the rad bombs, the chemical weapons. They're the guys who, like, everyone's like, oh, those guys are kind of weird. The Dark Sons of Death are destroyers that answer specifically to the Council of Stormseers. The Stormseers are what the White Scars call their librarians. And the Dark Sons of Death can only be used when a complete obliteration of an enemy is considered warranted. They're brutal. And in game, their rules are brutal as well. They kill very well. Their destroyer squads kicked up to the nth degree.
So could you call someone bad managed for bringing them to a tournament?
No, because at the end of the day, everything has an answer in Heresy. One of the things that I will always say this when you're building lists for Heresy, in the 40k universe, we look for balance via FAQ, point balancing, and things like that. In a Horus Heresy, you kind of find your crazy and just lean into it. And you build something that you want to have. Like, the community is self-governing in the sense of, if you are that guy, people like me will remember you, and other people who know me are going to be like, hey, Gabe, you remember that one guy? And I'm going to be like, got you. Right. So, and the Dark Sons of Death aren't necessarily game breaking. There is no one unit in the game that I would consider to be over the top game breaking. There are some guys who really play with the boundary of that statement.
Well, I mean, I was just saying, like, someone puts them on the table and be like, man, what did my guys do to deserve these?
No, but when we get to
Terrible
units like
joke.
that, I will make sure to tell you about them.
I feel like the Horus Heresy community or the Horus Heresy game in general, and this is 2.0, so we don't know how it is in 3.0, but not every list could be tailored to defeat everything. What I'm saying is, it's almost like rock, paper, scissors. Yes, you could try to bring everything you want that is OP and overpowered, but there's just armies and missions that just have your day. Like, it's no one army could take on everything. There's definitely some build choices and some things that you're going to build towards to be good at, and some things you're just not going to be. And
Yeah,
I think that's one thing Heresy has going for it that is really, really well crafted.
yeah, the creative freedom is fantastic. And like I said, everyone has their crazy to lean into. Every Legion has it. The Dark Sons of Death are just a cranked up version of Destroyer Squads. And other armies are going to have something similar. There's a lot of special Destroyer Squads out there. Uh, the next unit they have is called the Eben Keshig. These are guys who have a perceived stain or dishonor on them. They're basically just like the fuck ups of the Legion, and they volunteer to join the Eben Keshig, and they serve to basically just be a wall of armor to protect the rest of the Legion. Like they just walk out there like, please take my meat shield as penance. They are the Terminators. They're specifically in Tartarus Terminator armor, and they just run around in blacked out armor. And if they survive some of these really crazy things, they're considered redeemed and they can go into other stuff again. But the Eben Keshig are basically the guys that bear some form of shame, and to pay penance for that, they run out there as a meat shield. Then you have the Golden Keshig. These guys are on jet bikes, and they're considered the most prestigious unit in the White Scars. Like this is, if you're a White Scar, this is what you want to be when you grow up, right? They circle enemies until they get them to a certain point, and then they form into a phalanx and they kill everybody. They are the quintessential warfare style that the White Scars seek to perfect.
Would you say they're Kinjacental? That was a terrible joke. I'm gonna edit that one out.
now you
Now you
can't.
can't.
Now you
Yeah.
can't. No, you ain't edited that shit. You're getting stuck with that horrible joke. So the next thing in the Legion that's really cool, they have a unit called Falcon's Claws, which are scouts. And scouts, funny enough, is scouts are your neophytes. They're your up and
Wannabes.
comers. They're your new guys before they get their final augmentations. Scouts are that level before you become a full fledged Astartes. And the Falcon's Claws are basically scouts that are built to assassinate. They go in, they kill HQs, they kill key defenses, they kill certain things in a war or disrupt certain things in the war that help the rest of the Legion advance. One of the coolest thing about them is because of that, they actually have marked for death in the game, very similar to other units where before the game starts, they can be like, that's what I'm going after, and they can go kill that one unit and get bonuses against it. It's pretty cool. They also have infiltrate and all that kind of stuff. They're a really cool scout unit. The next cool thing that these guys have are what are called Kazagan speeders. These are javelin land speeders that are modified to carry assault cannons and autocannons. This is what I meant by they put heavy weapons on land speeders to maintain speed while also getting heavy weapon reinforcement.
That's crazy.
So those are all of the units and characters in the White Scars. That's the full Legion. Overall flavor of this Legion, it's Ricky Bobby shake and bake. It's like if you're not first, you're last. All speed, all go, all the juice. Hobby-wise, this is the most difficult army to paint because it is white with red trim.
You would
Yeah.
think that would be easy if you don't know how to paint. I do not know how to paint. So when I hear just white with red trim, I'm like, that sounds easy.
So from a hobby standpoint with white scars, and for you guys that are listening, everybody, guys, girls, kids, here's the deal. It's not that you want to avoid doing a difficult paint scheme. If you're going to take on white scars, please do a lot of research before you start painting them, because you'll end up in a situation where a year down the road, you're looking back at your first model and you're like, wow, I sucked at painting white a year ago. And you'll want to go back and retouch that up. This is one of those legions where their paint scheme looks amazing when it's actually done, and it looks good. It really is. The white with the red and then gold trim on some of the weapons and the shields. It's very beautiful. Painting white is difficult from a painting perspective because you don't ever actually paint white. You paint layering light grays up to a white to get a good paint scheme. There are some ways to paint them. I just tell you, if you're gonna play white scars, Jesus, words, Gabe, please research the paint stuff before you start so that you know what you're getting into ahead of time. They're a fantastic legion to play. They can do a lot of really fun stuff. Lots of jet bike models, lots of land speeder models, lots of beautiful ornate shields and weapons. They carry like scimitar style weapons. They're beautiful, but definitely not the easiest to paint. When I say the Dark Angels one is forgiving because it's black with red, black can always cover up black. Covering something up with white is rough. So make sure that if you're going to play White Scars, which they're a fantastic legion, they're very fun. Research the paint scheme before you get into it and know what you're doing before you start this legion. I can't
I also
stress
want
that
to
enough.
interject here and say that yeah, they may be white with red trim, but that doesn't mean you have to paint them exactly like GW says. Make them your army. This is your guys.
Yeah, you don't have to. Like, definitely, you can flare out and do some pretty cool stuff. There's room to expand on the paint schemes. What I will tell you is, historically, Horus Heresy is a reenactment game. There's not as much free roaming paint freedom as what you see in 40K, where you can do like Rainbow Marines. There's one guy who does like the Angry Marines. I saw one guy who made an entire army of female Catachan, and for all the power weapons, he put purses with bricks in them and called them power malls.
That's pretty
Right?
awesome.
Yeah, fantastic. You can paint your army however you want to. I will never tell someone like, how dare you paint this army the way it is. I'm telling you, one of the only downsides to Horus Heresy is there's a sub faction of people they call rivet counters, which are the guys you're going to walk over and basically argue that you don't have the right pattern rhino, or you're using the wrong pattern armor, you don't have the right decals, you're not using the right color scheme. Just be ready to just say it is your army and you can paint it how you want to. I'll never tell you or anyone else, you cannot put pink on this, you can't put white on this, you can't put green on this. I'll simply say that there are some closed-minded people out there, and be ready to deal with them. So that wraps up pretty much all the white scars. Do you guys have any other questions about the white scars?
Nope. Quick and easy. That's what they're known for, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
So,
So the next legion I want to get into is the Space Wolves. For those of you who are following along at home with like a checklist, because there's some of you that are, I am trying to read these in order, but we're skipping over the traitor units and doing only the loyalists. So, Space Wolves hail from a planet called Fenris. Fenris is categorized as a death world. It is brutal. It is an ice world. It is not kind. It is very, very mean, very, very brutal. A little bit of fan service for you guys. Kyle, Christian, do you guys know what the Space Wolves are actually called?
Fenrir guys.
So, one of the common tropes in the Space Wolf community, and you're going to see this in true Space Wolf players, There are no wolves on Fenris. That's the saying. The Space Wolves refer to themselves as the Vilka Fenrika. Only outside legions call them the Space Wolves. All Space Wolves call themselves the Vilka Fenrika.
Okay.
You're basically talking about all of the Nordic craziness wrapped in power armor and then given gene seeds. When the Emperor found Leman Russ, the primarch of the Space Wolves, Leman Russ was like, "You're not my dad. My dad could outdrink me." So they had a drinking contest. And they said, "You're not my dad. My dad could beat me in a fight." So they had a fight. They are straight up Vikings. They're space Vikings, Nordic space Vikings, through and through. Earlier, we discussed how the lion, you can put him up against pretty much anything, and he'll kill pretty much anything out there, right?
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I know of the lion and the and Lehman Russ and just their little rivalry, and it just makes me laugh every
So
time.
the lion can pretty much kill anything on the table that isn't Lehman Russ, right? I cannot explain more without going into a whole lot of lore stuff, but they have the most crazy rivalry. And on a tabletop, I've seen these two guys roll into combat and just sit there and beat the crap out of each other for 2 or 3 rounds, and then both of them just die together. Like they are the lion and the wolf story is actually a thing, to where every time Space Wolves and Dark Angel see each other, they have a duel, because the first time the lion and Lehman Russ met each other, they fought for days, apparently. Lehman Russ he's normally categorized by most people as like, oh, he's a dumb Viking. He's just raw. I'll go kill it with my axe. No, he is very calculating. He is very intelligent. He is very, very good at what he does. He has an amazing battle prowess. And at his core, and the Vilka Fenrika as a whole, are not a legion made for war. They are a legion made for execution. There are some canonical consistencies that indicate the Space Wolves may have been the legion that slaughtered and killed the 2nd and the 11th when they were purged from the Imperial record. It's not hard confirmed anywhere, but it's very heavily leaned into in multiple publications that are canon. During the Horus Heresy, the Emperor sent out a message to Lehman Russ that said, "Hey, go check out Magnus. He's doing hood rat shit that's messing with my plans. Go talk to him and censure him." Horus intercepted that message and changed it to say, "Hey, you got to go to Prospero and kill all of the Thousand Sons." There was no hesitation on the part of the Space Wolves to show up and just start killing Thousand Sons. There was zero hesitation. They were like, "Damn, we got to do this again. I guess we got to kill the red ones this time." They showed up to Prospero and they raised it. They are an execution legion. That's what they're made for. Lehman Russ is very good about that. He has a lot of rules that he can impact against infantry or characters. He has multiple fighting profiles. Very strong Primarch. Great, great gameplay.
So, just on that note, how we were talking about them and basically sent for execution, wasn't this was also the legion that Malcador sent out when the Horus Heresy kicked off to, I guess, oversee some of the legions? I think I'm getting that right. He sent out like different packs of Space Wolf to like.
So they sent out little packs to not oversee, but mainly to observe other Primarchs. There were some Space Wolves attached to some Ultramarines. There were some attached to a few other legions where, these little wolf packs were sent. These, pretty much just really grizzled, hardcore veteran Space Wolves were sent out to just keep an eye on things to make sure no one was doing anything traitorous. And if they did, they actually had to take on the responsibility of trying to kill primarchs. If that does not show you how dedicated Space Wolves are to this executioner-like role, that squads of like 5 or 6 dudes were like, we will definitely try to kill a primarch.
Yeah, how did that work out for them?
Okay, so fun story, small snippet. There's a point in one of the stories where Gilliman has these little, wolf guards chilling with him, and the Dark Angels show up. And as always, the wolves are like, nominate your champion. And the lion, being 100% over this bullshit, is like, I nominate myself as a champion. And the guy was like, you can't do that. And the lion's like, I'm a Primarch. Are you going to tell me what I can and can't do? And they're like, okay, fine, let's do this. And the lion's like, cool, take your swing. And this wolf swings at the lion. And in the book, it literally describes G-Man going, holy shit, that was fast. Could I have dodged that? I don't know if I could have dodged that. That's a Primarch acknowledging that a Space Wolf was potentially fast enough to wound him before he could block. And it was also G-Man saying, like, damn, good on the lion. I don't know if I could have done the same thing he just did. So, not to say that the Space Wolves couldn't have won that fight, but whatever Primarch they decided to tussle with would have known he was in a fight. Space Wolves are very good at combat. They're great at what they do, and I'm going to discuss their units. They have a lot of units that build into this weird kind of thing. They even have guys that they have the only recorded instance of Space Marines with like full-on PTSD. It's a thing. So the first major character that is not Leman Russ in their Legion is called Gigor Fellhand. He is arrogant as fuck. He's arrogant as all hell. So arrogant that he kind of has a bad name in the Legion because he's gotten squads killed. He has gotten squads outright slaughtered because he didn't want to be revered as a coward, so he led them into battles he knew he could not win. He was one of the only people who flat out said, we should not be questioning the Thousand Sons on Prospero. We should not be censoring the Thousand Sons on Prospero. We should kill them and erase them from record, and there will be no Prospero. He was the number one person to say we should kill all of them. Gigor Fellhanded is very arrogant, but he is very capable. In the game, he carries an Artificer Lightning Claw, and he's got some rules that really lean into that arrogant side of him. Really cool model, but really weird backstory. The next one is he doesn't have a lot of in-game rules. He's just a company commander. It's Varl Redblade. He's just a Wolf Lord. What he's most commonly known for is he looks like Fat Bastard from the Austin Powers movies. I am not kidding that enough, Kyle. At some point when you're putting this video up, if you want to throw a picture of this in there, go look him up. His name is actually spelled HVARL Redblade. Go look him up. I swear to God, it's Fat Bastard in Power Terminator armor. I wish I was kidding.
Oh my God, it is.
Yeah. So these are the only characters that are depicted in the actual tabletop game. Now, 40K Space Wolves fans are going to be really aggravated at the fact that there's a guy named Fellhanded that isn't Bjorn. What's going to aggravate you even more is Bjorn has a alarmingly big presence in the Horus Heresy novels, but he does not have a playable model in the rules. Let's look forward to that in 3.0 and call it, what it is. Now, as for units,
But before we move on, speaking on that subject, because we kind of brought it in that leeway, or how, now that you said that Bjorn had a big part in the Horus Heresy and he's in 40K, what Loyalist models are still around besides Bjorn from the 40k? There's not a lot, right? Unless
There are
you're
none.
probably a traitor legion, right?
There are no loyalist models from the heresy era that are present in 40k other than Bjorn. And Bjorn is not really present. He's been a dreadnought for so long that they really only thaw him out for the worst of the worst. He's he's even reaching the end of what a dreadnought can sustain. So he doesn't really count, but he's the only one still around from the heresy that isn't a Primarch. Now, on the traitor side, there's tons that are still around. And that's why the traitor episode is going to be pretty dense because there's still a lot of stuff going on.
Yep.
Um,
Okay, now back to units.
So the Space Wolf units, starting from just the regular stuff, they have Gray Slayers and Gray Stalkers. So the Gray Slayers are basically tactical squads that are given autonomy to do seek and destroy missions. They're tactical squads that carry shields and axes in game, and they go out and they have autonomy to do whatever they want to go kill and hunt and do what they need to do. Then the Gray Stalkers are also units that are given basically like chain swords, assault pistols, assault weapons. They're assault squads that go behind the Gray Slayers and kill whatever was too heavily entrenched for the Gray Slayers to take care of themselves. They just went through and just basically did mop up. If those two couldn't get the job done, that's when you sent in the Hunter Packs, the Jorland Hunter Packs. These Hunter Packs were essentially assault squads that carried hand flamers, and all they did was go through lighting shit on fire. They would burn you out of position, burn you into other positions. They would burn you to where you would push back into Gray Slayers and Gray Stalkers. That was their function. And in game, they play that function. They have twin hand flamers on all of these guys. After that, you have what are called the Vergear Wolfguard Terminators. They're exactly what they sound like. They are bodyguards for Russ, and they're the prototype for what becomes the Wolfguard in the 40k universe. They're all hardened veterans. They're all very, very capable. So capable that these are actually the guys that are sent out to babysit the Primarchs, like we talked about earlier. After that, you have a unit called the Death Sworn. The Death Sworn have done so much horrible shit and have seen such horrible things. They're not considered men anymore. The Legion doesn't even consider them to be part of the Astartes or part of the Legion as like a functioning group. They constantly want to kill. They constantly crave to kill. When they kill enemy units, they worship the cult of Mordecai and will feast on the bodies of the slain to show their following to the cult of Mordecai. In game, they are so ostracized that the only thing that can join them are speakers of the dead, which are a form of librarian in the Wolfguard stuff. These dudes are brutal. In game, they can carry stasis grenades, and they always have a rule that whenever they fight in combat, when they get killed, you just put the model on its side, and at the end, all the dead models get to make one final attack on the way down. Because they're so out of their mind violent. These are the closest thing you will see to truly broken Space Marines.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Even the Legion is like, they're not with us. But the Space Wolves still take care of them. They still try to like, they kind of use them the way modern 40k uses Death Watch, or I'm sorry, not Death Watch, Death Company for Blood Angels. where it's like there's just a chaplain running around, be like, that sure looks like a horse, doesn't it? Let's go over here. They're very akin to that. They're basically your broken down, PTSD riddled space wolves, and it's really a sad story that they're still even functioning, but they are a part of what the space wolves can take.
So this brings up another question, just random take. You mentioned that like space will still accept them. Now looking into and thinking about it, was there ever an instance of, I wouldn't say favoritism, but well, yeah, I would say favoritism of a Primarch and their Legion having Space Marines from their homeworld or Space Marines from what just had their genetic seed implanted in them from the Emperor that were not from their homeworld?
Yes.
So, like, does that play a big part in like these? Well, you just said there was no wolves on Fenris, but these wolves from Fenris, like,
So the no wolves on Fenris thing is something that develops after they're reunited with Lehman Russ. The no wolves on Fenris thing is kind of a trope because they're not the space wolves; they're the Vilka Fenrica.
yeah, they're space wolves to me, man.
That's that right,
The Dark
because we don't
Angel
play
in me
space
is
wolves
just
like
saying they're space wolves to me.
yeah, realistically, you're not going to go to events and be like, "What are you playing?" I'm playing Word Bears. Like, oh yeah, that guy's got a really good looking White Scars army, and that guy's got some amazing Vilka Fenrica. Like, yeah, it's not that kind of it's not that serious. But the diehard Space Wolf players, I will tell you this. I have a couple of really diehard Space Wolf players. Shout out to my buddy Brian out in Midland and my buddy Will up in Dallas. If you make some offhanded like lore remark, they will be like, there are no wolves on Fenris. They will call you out. And I love it. They live and die by their legions, and I love it.
So how do they feel if you call them Lehman Roos?
The next time you play against them, you test those waters. But yeah, so there are going to be some instances where we're going to break into, specifically with the Blood Angels, where we're going to discuss that line between new Legion and old Legion. It does cause problems.
And just to hit home on Kyle saying that he's a fucking Thousand Suns player, just so all you wolves out
Yeah.
there.
I mean,
Yeah, come at you, boy.
yeah, Lehman Roos.
So that's actually all the Space Wolves.
Nice.
In hobby wise, Space Wolves are a blast to paint. Hobby wise, I think they're one of the most fun legions to paint because there's nobody out there. I don't care who you are. There's nobody who's ever looked at an army of Vikings and power armor and been like, "Yeah, that's lame." Said no one ever. Lehman Russ can actually take like massive ass Fenrisian wolves as part of his retinue. They're so fun to hobby. And they're good. They're fun to play. They're really thematic. You can have a lot of fun with them. You don't get pigeonholed into having to follow one trope or another. They have a lot of flexibility, a lot of fun, and they're a lot of fun to paint. Their paint scheme is pretty easy. It's like oh god, Space Wolf players are going to kill me. It's kind of a baby blue off gray.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in Horus Heresy, it's closer to a ceramite gray with like a hint of that in there, but they have a really cool paint scheme. I like them. They're pretty good.
Was Lehman Russ's armor ever black? Like a dark black or no?
So Lehman Russ, his armor was more of a it was a really dark gray with like lighted gray highlights. But
Okay.
he carried but primarchs are never the example of how your army's painted. They're always kind of different. There's a few outliers, G-Man, Gilliman for the Ultramarines. He's in blue armor because he's poster boy material. He doesn't actually, you know, do crazy stuff essentially. Um, Angron is in gold armor. Sanguinius is in gold armor. Their legions are both in white and red. So Leman Russ, he's in like a darker armor with gray highlights.
Okay. I was just asking because I swear I remember seeing a picture, and usually when I see a picture of Leman Russ, it's that darker blue, light blue color. But I swear I've also seen depictions of him where it was almost like black armor with gold trim and a red wolf on it.
No, it's more like his armor is more like a black with gray highlights and like the wolf pelt and everything. There's not a lot of red on there, but there's a lot of like gray highlighting, but it is a lot darker than regular armor. It almost is a black. His
Yeah.
actual like lore photo.
Hmm.
And then also things about Space Wolves gameplay wise is they're a very aggressive army to play if you want to play them aggressive, but they can also play defensive. They're really fun. They're close combat good. They're just a really fun full send army. So yeah, definitely I can get down on Space Wolves. I'll put them in a 3. They are very playable. They're very fun, but a lot of their models are still Forge World style models. I know there's not a Forge World anymore, but a lot of their models are still the resin stuff. So if you're wanting to get, Deathsworn or Vargar Terminators, or you want to get Slayers, or you want to get Stalkers, or you want Hunter Packs, all of those are still in resin, so the accessibility is low. But gameplay wise, Space Wolves are a riot. So next down the line is the Imperial Fists. So we're going to start with Rogel Dorn. Rogel Dorn is what happens when you take a Vulcan and make them a Space Marine. He is all logic. Don't get me wrong, he does have emotions and whatnot, but he's purely logic driven, and he is a defensive siege master. His legion kind of follows suit with that, where they're very defensive capabilities. They're really good at it. Not to say they can't fight, but their whole shtick is they're the unmovable wall, essentially. Rogaldorn later in the heresy is called upon to go to the Imperial Palace and basically fortify it to make it traitor proof, which is hilarious because there's traitors in the basement. So that's his whole thing. That's why they call it like the Imperial Fists and everything else. Is like they're supposed to be, like the defenders. The first named character in the brick, his name is Alexis Pollux, and this dude was massive. I'm talking homeboy was on the protein. He was really, really big, and he was also the closest thing to the embodiment of Rogel Dorn. He was very rational and very logical. It's actually said in like his lore that he is supremely logical. And he is also one of the Stone Men. So Rogel Dorn had like a cohort of advisors in his legion, and they were called the Stone Men. Alexis Pollux was one of these Stone Men. During the heresy, he became very good friends with an Iron Warriors commander named Dantiok, which is hilarious because if you read the lore, Iron Warriors and Imperial Fists, they fucking hate each other. I'm talking this is oil and water. They don't jive. He carries a colossal power gauntlet and a storm shield. If that tells you how this dude is built, he carries basically an Imperial Fist and a shield. After the Horus Heresy, he became the founder of the Crimson Fists. All right. The next person down the line,
Crimson Fist.
yeah, the Crimson Fist, which somehow became Space Hispanics, which that's a whole nother thing. But yes,
We need to dive into that lore some other time.
yeah, we really do, considering the name of the next person in the Imperial Fists named characters. So Camba Diaz. Camba Diaz was one of the Lord Castellans of the Imperial Fists. He is a siege master, and he was a co-commander with Sigismund, who we will get into later. Sigismund was the first captain of the Imperial Fists, but Camba Diaz was a co-commander with him. During the war, small throwback here. Remember how I said that Imperial Fists are like supremely defensive? Like they're very good at holding their defenses?
Yep.
They have a saying called "no step back." Amazing, supreme Imperial Fist commanders and sergeants, and even just frontline troops, believe in this principle of no step back. No step back ever. Never take a step back. Camba Diaz died while cutting down heretics in one of the most pivotal battles of the Horus Heresy. And his lore basically indicates that he always walked forward and he never walked back. The way that translates into the game is when he is on his last wound, he has a 4+ feel no pain. You guys have you guys have experience with FMPs and how they work, but when he is on his last wound, he has a 4+ feel no pain. Which
Pretty
is
crazy.
pretty nuts, right?
Does he get like the 4+ reroll, then like the 4+ feel no pain?
No, because he's not a warder. Thank God.
Thank God. I was just thinking about that. I was like, huh, wait.
Mm-mm. He does not get that rule. But the next person we're going to talk about does.
He was almost better than a Wendy's 4 for 4, dude. He got another one on top of it.
Right. So the next person on the list is Fafnir Ran. Fafnir Ran is known as the Lord Seneschal. There is no powder coating about this. He is an executioner. That is his job. He executes. He fights in duels. He is a very unique character. When he fought at the Siege of Terra, he fought all the way until the end of the Siege of Terra. He lived beyond the Siege of Terra, and he later founded a chapter known as the Executioners.
Did you
There's a
say a
lot of
chapter?
those.
Yes, after the Horus Heresy, he founded a successor chapter of the Imperial Fists called the Executioners. Now, he also is the embodiment of honor. During the Siege of Terra, they were fighting with the Iron Warriors and they were fighting with the world leaders. He was fighting an Iron Warrior, and the Iron Warrior was wounded and on his knees, and he helped that Iron Warrior stand so that he could die on his feet.
That's pretty good.
He is amazing. In game, he carries 2 axes and a shield because he is called up from the Warders, which we'll get into those a little bit later. His rules actually led him to where he can pick attack profiles or defensive profiles. He can swing with 1 axe or 2 axes. He can swing with an axe and a shield to get an invul, or he can swing with twin axes to get extra attacks or a different fighting profile. He's very flexible. He's an executioner. That's his gig. Any questions about Fafnir Rand, Camba Diaz, or Alexis Pollock so far?
No, not
No.
necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we're good.
Okay. So the next person up is Evander Garrus. This guy is considered to be like the forgotten son. Dorn did not like him. The reason Dorn did not like him is what you come to find out about the Horus Heresy is a lot of the Marines that are in the Horus Heresy are actually survivors of the Unification Wars on Terra. Evander Garrus is one of those veterans of the Unification Wars. That means he has been with the Legions since the start and before the Great Crusade to find all the primarchs. He has a rule in game because of this called the Unfavored Son, because Dorn did not like him. Dorn did not like him because he felt that he was exceptionally brutal. The reason he was this way was because pre-heresy, he fought with the Luna Wolves and learned how to fight like a Luna Wolf. He
Which
is
is
very...
the subchapter of the Space Wolves?
No, the
No.
Luna Wolves were the name of the legion that later became the Sons of Horus.
Ah,
The Prime Traitor Legion is who he studied with before the Legion and fought with before the Legion. He adapted a lot of their tactics, which is basically just brutality incarnate through war, right? He never fought with Dorn, never fought alongside Dorn. He was rather forgotten by Dorn, but he is a Lord Castellan, and he was very good at his job. He also fights very unorthodox compared to other Imperial Fists. In game, that translates, he has a rule called the Unfavored Son, which basically means that he is restricted on what he can and can't fight with. But he also gives any unit he joins Deep Strike, and he can give any unit in his army under a certain right of war Deep Strike to go with him. It's not exclusive to him, but when you pair it with him, it gets really, really fun, really, really fast. The next person we're going to talk about is probably the most infamous Imperial Fist there is, which is Sigismund. Sigismund was the first captain of the Imperial Fists, and he was the Marshal of the Templars. The Templars were actually what the entire First Legion were called, the Templars of the Imperial Fists. He was also one of the Stone Men that were in the council for Dorn. He is an obnoxiously and brutally good swordsman, like to a degree that you almost get tired of it. He's so good that he was the first person to ever carry the Black Sword, which is appointed to you by the Emperor and declares you as the Emperor's champion. He has only ever lost one duel. That was to Sevatar, the captain in the Night Lords. And it was said that during this duel that Sevatar cheated to win, which, don't get me wrong, Sigismund was like, hey man, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying hard enough, I'll take the L. Like, he owned it. But he is obnoxiously good with a sword.
okay, so how did he cheat?
He headbutted him in the face.
That's not cheating.
If I remember right, it was either a headbutt, it was either a headbutt or something else, but he cheated. I'd have to go back and reread the story, but he basically says he cheated, and
With
Sigismund's
the
like,
pocket
nah.
sand?
We were
Yeah,
fighting,
you're
and he
right.
hurt me. He cheated.
Right, so it was actually one of those things where all the other people who were watching was like, oh, that was dirty, and Sevatar was like, bitch, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, and Sigismund was like, he ain't wrong.
So my question is, this guy sounds like a remarkable duelist or whatever. How would Corswain fare against him?
Corswain would be bodied in the first round.
Okay.
Sigismund is so alarmingly good in game. He can kill primarchs if it's done right.
Well, I was talking about in lore.
Oh no, in lore, he will body Corswain.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, during the Siege of Terra, he goes out and he, like, again, he is a brutally good swordsman, and he tells himself in his head, every fight is a one-on-one fight if I do it correctly. And that's what he does. On the Siege of Terra, he's killing all kinds of people. One of the characters you know from the 41st millennium, Karn the Betrayer. Sigismund put him on his ass. They used to duel in the dueling cages. And if you look at Sigismund, he has a chain wrapped around his wrist and to his sword that holds it to the sword. He got that from Karn. That's a world eater shtick, but they were duel brothers. They would duel a lot. And though Karn is very good at what he does, Sigismund later almost killed him on the battlefield during the Siege of Terra. Sigismund is really good. In game, his weapon has instant death, and he himself has Eternal Warrior, which as a combination, GW, if you're listening to this podcast, which I doubt you are because we don't have very many listeners, but that shit was uncalled for. Having those two traits on the same person is ridiculously good. He later becomes the founder of the Black Templars, which you know of in 40K. So going beyond that, we're going to get into the units, unless you guys have some questions about any of these guys I've talked about just so far.
No.
Cool.
No, not really.
All right. Silence is golden. Let's get into it. So
I mean,
the first are the Huskarls. Huskarls are basically bodyguard units, but to a degree that's obnoxious. They are not called bodyguard units. Inside the Imperial Fists and some of their sister legions, they're referred to as mobile bastions. Fathom that. Being so good at defending something, a vital position or a vital commander, that they literally refer to you as a mobile bastion. They are drawn up from the warders. You have to be one of the greatest warders in the entire legion to be considered for a Huskarl. And then they throw you into Terminator armor and they walk you around with like a vital command or a vital structure or a vital point. And the Huskarls just hold it. They're just mobile bunkers, dude. They're great. On that, we're going to talk about the warders. So the warders are the absolute best of the breacher squads. So they carry, instead of carrying bolters and shields, they carry axes and shields. And they train like crazy to be good at what they do. Warders are what you guys hate in the Rite of War, which is known as Stone Gauntlet. The warders are the guys that get the 4-up invul save while they're base-to-base contact, and then they get a feel no pain with an apothecary, and then they get to re-roll their invulnerables. They're just tough because that's what they're made to be, just defensively tough.
shout out to Justin. Fuck you.
So the next one down the line is the first company, which are the Templar Brethren. They're actually the honor guard of Dorne. And all of them, there is not a single Templar Brethren in that entire first company that is not a weapon master. They train and train and train and train and train until they are just there. In game, they are that. They're very good in close combat. They all carry power swords. They can all carry shields. They're very, very strategically good, but they're not warders tough, if that makes sense. The next unit we're going to talk about are called Castellan Centurions. So every army has access to Centurions, but the Imperial Fists have access to one called a Castellan. That's where you get similar to what Alexis Pollux and Camba Diaz and those guys are. Castellan commanders are essentially siege masters, and if you want a fortress built, you call a Castellan. In game, they do give some shooting bonuses to some units when they're attached to them. Specifically, like shooting bonuses when you're like doing certain things. They get better cover saves, things like that. They're very, very good at being defensive. They lend their credence to the Imperial Fist very strongly. There is another special unit which is more of an upgrade for vehicles called a Decurion. It's like a tank commander, but the Imperial Fists have a special one just for them that basically has enhanced damage against buildings and structures. It's all about siegecraft, which is kind of their shtick. That wraps up the Imperial Fists. So do you guys have any questions about any of these units, these characters, anything crazy?
So let's talk about what they look like. What's their scheme?
So Imperial Fists traditionally are yellow. Like banana yellow. Very yellow with black trim. The Templar Brethren are black. All black armor with like gold and silver trim. Their play style is very similar to how their Legion runs. They're very defensive. Like if you want to run a gun line, you can. But what you'll do more often than not is just make impenetrable units and walls where they can just sit on an objective and just hold it. Now, given that's 2.0, not 3.0. So when 3.0 drops, we're going to see what that does. There's already been some pretty interesting leaks about 3.0 where it's going to change how some of these armies play. But Imperial Fists are definitely a more defensive army than they are an offensive army.
So
So if
going
you're
off on how these guys look and how y'all said the yellow, I don't know if there's anything in lore to show or direct this, or it's just because, but like it's always interesting to me, like when you have these successor chapters, like you have the, I believe, the Crimson Fist, and you said the Black Templars, is like how they move away from those unique color, or those the main colors that we talked about. We talked about the yellow, we talked like, because I believe Crimson Fists are like blue and red, right?
Yeah. So okay. So let's talk. Let's talk about that. So some of the successor chapters, specifically the Imperial Fists, still have some successor chapters that pay tribute to their original. Like the Black Templars did not change their colors. What you see in the Black Templars right now is what Sigismund took from the first company of the Templar Brethren and made his own chapter. The paint scheme you see for the Black Templars today in the 41st millennium of 40K is exactly how the first company of the Imperial Fists looked during the Horus Heresy, which is dope as hell, right? The Crimson Fists were like, okay, well, Gilliman's proclamation said that we have to break up into chapters, but we're still going to keep the fist. We're going to change the colors. Now, there were some captains, and I'm not gonna go into which ones they are because that's 40K lore and it gets really crazy. There are some captains that when they left their legions were very spiteful of how their legion behaved during the heresy, or they were very like, fine, we're gonna go make our own legion with blackjack and hookers. And that's when you get these really crazy off the wall, um like the Howling Griffins, which are like, if I remember right, they're yellow and red, and they're from Ultramarines.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
it all comes down to basically the spirit of that chapter master that was there. So there were some divergence from that. You guys have to remember that that was during a time called the Great Scouring, where pretty much every legion, you have to remember that during the height of the Great Crusade, for instance, let's take Ultramarines and Word Bearers. Both of those legions were 250,000 legionnaires strong. And they were told to break down into 1,000 man chapters. That's, you run out of paint at some point or another, right? Like you can't be like, oh, let's do blue with green trim. No, we can't do that. That's the second company of the Ultramarines. Okay, let's do red with yellow trim. We can't do red with yellow trim. That's the Howling Griffins. Damn, all these colors, right? So that's kind of how that happened. So, any other questions before we move on? So next in our band of loyal misfits are the Blood Angels. I hate saying this, but they're space vampires in power armor. That's
Yeah.
Do they sparkle in the sunlight?
dude. They might.
Does.
they might. No, they might. Because I'm going to tell you guys some stuff about Sanguinius, and you're going to be like, "Oh yeah, that bitch sparkles." So Sanguinius is
Their Primarch.
he's their Primarch, but he is far and beyond one of the most iconic Primarchs of the entire game. He is one of the most iconic characters of the entire game and the entire story.
I think he is the most beloved Primarch, if I would have to say. I don't like him as much, but I think he is. Yeah, I could see that.
Among the community, yes. Like Blood Angels players are like, he's an actual angel. Because Homeboy has full blown feathery wings, and he's written to be the most gorgeous creature ever created.
Do they explain why he has wings?
Yes, it's a mutation.
Okay. He didn't go
Now,
and have robot wings installed. It's a dangerous process, but it's worth it.
no, like it's kind of weird. Because the 41st millennia, modern 40k is like burn the heretic, kill the mutant. Sanguinius is the most mutant of all of the primarchs. Like he legit has wings. That's why they call him the angel.
I also just want to kind of point out that the blood angel named Sanguinius, little on the nose.
Hey,
Kind of ridiculous.
this is Warhammer. A lot of it's going to be really on the nose. Okay. Things to know about Sanguinius is when he was reunited with his legion, he instituted different kind of rules. And one of the rules is like, hey, we don't just wage war. He encouraged his blood angels to become musicians, to become artists, to become sculptors. So every blood angel was a masterful, just beast on a battlefield, but would also play guitar, or also play the harp, or also paint pictures, or also sculpt rocks. Because of Sanguinius, that was his decree. Like, we are not just made to make war, we are also made to make beauty. You will make beauty.
Plus, chicks dig guitars.
Now,
Yeah, but if you're on a battlefield and some motherfucker pulls out a fucking lute or a fucking flute and plays that shit before fucking decimating you,
hey,
I don't know how I feel about that.
all I'm saying is we don't need blood angels to give vicious mockery. That's all I'm saying. So, now, one of the things I dislike about Sanguinius, and it's not his fault, it's the writer's fault, is later in the heresy he really leans into his plot armor, because he is one of the gifts he is bestowed when he is created by the Emperor is foresight. He has seen his death. He knows how he dies. And so there are actual parts in the book where he'll be like, I'll be back in a minute. And they're like, what are you doing? He's like, don't worry, I don't die today. And they're like, bitch.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's kind of weird. He kind of leans into his plot armor, but he does it in a really tasteful way.
I never really disliked that about him. I know a bunch of people give him shit for it, but I just feel maybe starting out when you're reading and he's like leaning into it a lot more, like you feel some type of way about it. But the fact that he does what he does without spoilers, knowing that kind of puts it at another level. Just like, damn,
You're not wrong.
he did this.
You're not wrong. He never goes to his guys. Like, it reminds me of the old Rob Williams joke where he's like going around the table. Is it me, Jesus? He's like, no, it's not you. And then he gets the old boy and he's like, is it me, Jesus? He never does that. Okay? He never does that, right?
Yeah, Emperor didn't raise no bitch. He just went in there and was just like, yeah, Dad, I know you're telling me to stay, but nah, I'm going.
Yeah, so one of the funny things about his Legion is they're really, really on par with this idea that they are above the normal rigmarole of Legion stuff. Like they're actually trying their best to be better, and they do embrace being musicians and painters and sculptors and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, well I challenge you to a dance off.
Sanguini's coming out looking like Hansel from Zoolander.
Pulling a Final Fantasy X tune. This is my song.
See, that's horrible. Just horrible. Sanguinius wants all his boys to be artists and singers and all that kind of jazz. Which leads us into the characters of the Blood Angels. So the first one I want to talk about is probably one of the most well-known Blood Angels throughout the entire heresy. He's part of what is later called the Big Five. These are like the five greatest fighters in the Imperium. And that's Ralduran. Ralduran is the first captain of the Blood Angels, and after the heresy becomes the first chapter master of the Blood Angels. He has the most adaptive fighting style of any Blood Angel that's out there. His command style is very in the moment. He's one of the original sons of Baal, which is the home world for the Blood Angels. He joined the Legion when Sanguinius was found. The way his rules work, and I'm going to say this to you guys, you guys are going to understand how broken this absolutely is. When I say he's one of the most adaptable, and as an Ultramarines player, this pisses me off to no end. Don't get it twisted. No, like with some of our friends, like when I talk to some of our friends that play Blood Angels, this is one of those things where I'm like, man, fuck this guy in particular. Do you guys know what his Warlord trait is?
I haven't looked into Blood Angels that much.
Fantastic. His Warlord trait is he can take any Warlord trait from any Loyalist Legion.
Okay.
Any Loyalist Legion. So you can be running around with Raldoron. Cool trick I picked up hanging out with some Imperial Fist. Boom, Warlord trait from the Imperial Fist. That's how he plays right now. He's very adaptable. That being said, he's very good, both in the lore and in the game. He's a very good commanding model. He's a Master of the Legion, so you can take him in a Rite of War. He's fantastic. Now, moving on from him, the next character in the Legion I want to talk about is called Aster Crone. Aster Crone was part of the Blood Angels before they found Sigismund. Now, Kyle's talking about how on the nose some of this stuff is, where they're Blood Angels and Sanguinius. Aster Crone was so fucking bloody in combat that even Sigismund was like, I don't like him. Aster Crone was from a time before he became the Enlightened Legion. Oh, why do you have to kill people all the time? Why can't you play a harmonica? Aster Crone wasn't about that bullshit. He was so bloody that Sanguinius basically revered him as like an outcast. He was not part of the normal command structure. He was not looked on in a good light in the Blood Angels. He was very much an outcast.
So you're saying that his musical instrument of choice is his enemy screams?
No, I'm saying that Aster Crone was very, very good at war. And when Sigismund was coming about into the Legion, he was trying to make them a more enlightened Legion. And Aster Crone was like, but I have the capability to tear apart tanks. Why won't you just let me tear apart tanks? If like he's one of those people, like, you're people that are like, if we were supposed to fly, God would have given us wings, right? Aster Crone is the direct opposite. He's like, if God gave me these people crushers, why can't I crush people? Sanguinius didn't like it.
And this, well, because he said Sanguinius is there and talking to him, so it had to be. And this is before the Black Rage, so this guy was already full tilt.
Right. And we're gonna get into some of the downsides of the Blood Angels and start getting into some of the units. But you're right, this does predate the Black Rage. For this, Aster Crone does have a couple of rules in game. One of those is he is the commander of the Inducti, which were the like sped to the front lines kind of units that we talked about in some other Legion discussions. He's the commander of them because they're so new they don't know he's a shitbag in the eyes of his Primarch. That's about what it translates to. The next
So
member of the Blood Angel. What were you saying, Kyle?
His reputation does not precede him.
Well, it's more along the lines of like at a certain point in the war, it's one of those people where they like talk about one of my favorite movies ever is Heartbreak Ridge, where they talk about like, hey, you're the kind of person that we should put in a glass case that says break glass only in case of war. This is your break glass in case of war. This dude's brutal. He'll get the job done. Now, he'll get the job done turning people into ketchup packets, but job done.
But that before the Primarchs and everything, that's basically what the Emperor wanted, right? He just wanted, yeah.
They were fighting on this crusade to find all the Primarchs. They were doing. Aster Crone is not a victim of doing his job badly. He did his job fantastic. He was a victim of being told, "I know you're really good at killing people, but maybe you should play the piano." Now, whether or not you consider Astrochrome to be running around like a half emo comb over, just like, I just want to focus on my war, Dad. That's a completely different topic altogether.
It's not a phase. I've been doing it for centuries.
Yeah, for sure, right? So he's basically the commander of the Inducti late in the heresy. The next person of the Blood Angels who's very significant and does have a model is Dominion Zephon. So Dominion Zephon is a very controversial member of the Blood Angels, very controversial, because he became known as the High Host, which is the master of the destroyers of a legion. As we've been talking about it earlier, the destroyers were the most ruthless, unethical, like murder machines of a legion. They employ some of the most treacherous weapons, the most treacherous, like reasonings to do things. Like, those are the destroyers, and this guy became the absolute best of them. He is so good at being a destroyer, he earns the name the Bringer of Sorrow.
That's a pretty cool nickname.
To think that there is a space marine out there that people are like, hey man, do you hear who's coming over for dinner? Yeah, man, it's a Bringer of Sorrow. Really? That's some hood ass shit. And
my boy BOS.
yeah, right. Like, it really is some crazy stuff. Now, what's actually really crazy is he learned to play guitar and play other instruments, like Sanguinius said everybody should play. And he's like, yeah, man, I'm really good at playing this instrument. I'm really, really good. Now, during the Great Crusades, they came across basically some big ass Xenos aliens. And these big aliens ripped off both his arms, ripped off one of his legs, and crippled the other leg.
Damn.
He became so crippled that they would put prosthesis on him, and the nerve damage in his body would not allow him to work correctly. Like, he would be out fighting, and his gun would randomly go off because he'd squeeze the trigger in accident because his nerve damage could not communicate with the limbs. So he was transferred to what was called the Crusader Host. The Crusader Host is very vague, but these are basically the guys at the back of the Great Crusade that just sat in the back and filled out paperwork. They didn't have very good frontline roles. I tell you all of this because late in the heresy, he goes toward Terra and he comes across a member of the Mechanicum named Arkan Lan. Now, Arkan Lan put something in him called the Paragon of Restoration. And the Paragon of Restoration was basically new prosthesis limbs, but they were powered by dark ages of technology. Specifically, Arkan Lan put an abominable intelligence into the limbs to trick them into being compatible with Arkan Lan's body, and then took the AI back out. After that, he had full use of his arms and his body. He could go out and he could fight and raise hell and do all the stuff that he did before. But now he's on Terra. Spoilers ahead. When Sanguinius died, all of the Blood Angels went batshit crazy. All of them did. But not Dominion Zephon. And when asked by one of the other legionaries from another legion that was fighting with him on the Siege of Terra, he said, what's going on? Why aren't you affected? And he said, my brothers have never felt this kind of sorrow. I have lived with this sorrow for generations. I'm already too broken to feel the pain they're experiencing.
I mean, he was just a little bit crippled. I mean, you
So
just
not-
lost your fucking Primarch. Like,
So not only is he the bringer of sorrow, he's also a Debbie Downer.
Yeah, Homeboy definitely had some confidence issues after the marring, right? So in game, he is a sword wielding destroyer. He cannot join squads unless they have bitter duty, because he himself has bitter duty. He has some other rules that are really crazy. Has a jump pack and some other stuff. And you can see that he has like prosthetics on his model. He's pretty cool in game, but I had to explain all the story to explain like how he is what he is. Any questions about the characters before I move on to the units?
No, I just have not a question about the characters, but a question about the Legion as a whole.
Okay.
I don't remember where, but I remember someone talking about, because I was talking about Blood Angels. Why are they Blood Angels? And one person also told me that they do have an ability, and or a trait or something. I don't know if it relates to the tabletop, but yes, they cannot. I don't know if drink other chapters' blood, but it has something to do with other chapters' blood or their chapter's blood, and they like not gain their abilities, but gain knowledge or something from that
That's
past gene seed or something weird like that. I
that's
forgot what it was
technically
actually.
that's technically all Space Marines, but it's very loose canon. Now later in the 41st millennium, Blood Angels do like drink each other's blood and like pass it around as like a pour one out for the homies kind of thing. But it's very loose canon for all Space Marines that they can eat brain matter of other things and kind of see its thoughts. And when I say very loose canon, I do mean very loose.
It's kind of nasty.
Yeah, kind of. So going into the units, the first that you want to talk about is the Sanguinary Guard. I don't have to explain this because the name says it all, but I will. They're Sanguinius's bodyguards. They are the Sanguinary Guard. In game, at least right now in 2.0, what makes them kind of cool is if you have Sanguinius on the table and they themselves are on the table, when Sanguinius starts to take wounds, they get stat boost. Which is nuts.
Yep.
So when Sanguinius gets below a certain wound threshold, they get extra attacks.
That makes sense. But that makes sense why the guy that I played against put the wounds on Sanguinius at first. He purposely brought Sanguinius down.
Yeah, you bring Sanguinius down, all the Sanguinary Guard get better. So,
and these are the models with the fake wings, right? Because they can't have real wings like Dad.
So in Horus Heresy, they can have the wings, but they typically don't. They're just jump pack troops. The wings are more of a 40k style thing. But yes, these are the guys that have the fake wings. They weren't cool enough to grow some like a man. So the next unit we're going to talk about is very controversial. The reason why they are the way they are is because Blood Angels have a secret, and that is the Red Thirst. Even all the way back into early Heresy, you hear instances where Blood Angels essentially go blood crazy, and they start drinking and eating the blood of fallen comrades or fallen enemies. They just get bloodthirsty. There is a unit called the Aphenom. I don't have a better way of explaining it, but they're basically Blood Angels Gestapo. They investigate Blood Angels to make sure they are carrying on the correct namesake and behaviors of the Blood Angels. And if they find you to be in violation of that, they judge you and kill you. Early in the heresy, when Blood Angels went crazy, Sanguinius elected and chose to kill them himself. If that gives you an idea of how sad Sanguinius can get, he voluntarily killed thousands of his own sons throughout the heresy when they fell to the Red Thirst.
So are the Red Thirst and the Black Rage the same thing, or is it
No,
just
they are not. The Red Thirst is a genetic hiccup where the Blood Angels craved blood when they got kind of overwhelmed with it. The Black Rage was a direct blackout result of Sanguinius dying. It was a psychic echo.
It was a great disturbance in the Blood Angels force.
Yeah. The reason why these are not necessarily important is because in the Horus Heresy, they are not reflected in the rules in any fashion. The Red Thirst does not impact the Blood Angels. The Black Rage does not impact the Blood Angels. It doesn't exist. But it does give us a view into the reason why the Aphenom exist. The Aphenom carry what are called Blades of Judgment. And when you have more than one Aphenom, they are referred to as an Aphenom Court. They are alarmingly good in close combat in the game. They carry fantastic weapons.
You get enough of them, do they turn into a Phenom Gallon?
I will strike you. So moving on. That's the Aphenom Court. The next run down the list are the Dawnbreaker cohort.
Fuck those guys.
Dawnbreakers are just smash mouth, high caliber elite assault marines. They carry falling star pattern war spears. They have grenade launchers on their wrists. They're just next level elite assault squads. That brings us to the Angels tiers. The Angels tiers are Blood Angel specific destroyer squads. They can carry all sorts of weapons. They can take close combat weapons, chainswords, pistols. They can take twin pistols. They can take twin Volkite pistols. They can take grenade launchers. They can take Elastis assault cannons. They're very flexible, but they're destroyer squads, and they're very, very good. But they are destroyers, so they do have the bitter duty rule. You can't have an apothecary or a tech marine or any of that craziness.
They can have what's his face.
They can have Dominion Xiphon. You are correct. Then you have the Crimson Paladins.
I
They
don't think I've
fight.
heard of this one.
So the Crimson Paladins fight side by side with the Sanguinary Guard. They're basically like the opposite coin to the Sanguinary Guard. They're referred to as a moving bulwark. They're very good at establishing like a defense and things like that, and they're incredibly disciplined. They're
Oh, are
more
these
of,
the Terminators?
yes.
Okay.
They're very disciplined, they're very strong, and they're very tough. What makes them really crazy is in game, the more you hurt them, the tougher they get because they don't want to be bad at their job. They're the Sanguinary Guard, but in Terminator armor, and to a whole nother degree, they're tough, man. They carry some really cool looking shields. They carry really cool weapons. They're a fantastic unit to get.
So, like, as they take wounds, their toughness goes up for real in game?
Not their toughness, but they get a feel no pain. As once you start to outnumber them, they get a feel no pain. Their shields, whenever you go to wound them, you're at -1 on the wound roll, not -1 on the toughness or whatever. But like, if you need a 3 to wound, now you need a 4. They're tough. They're real good. The next thing the Blood Angels can take that no one else can take are what are called Incandius Dreadnoughts. It's a Contemptor Dreadnought with a fucking jump pack, man.
Yeah.
It can use that jump pack to deep strike or to be engaged one time during the game to move more inches than normal. It can take certain kinds of things. It's also important to note that all sergeants in the Blood Angels and all of the special characters can take what are called weapons of perdition, which are just really strong versions of the same weapons you get in Mauls of Perdition, Spears of Perdition, Spears of Perdition. They're crazy close combat oriented.
Did you just say spears twice?
No. I don't think I did. If I did, I meant swords. Meh.
Okay.
I'm 3
Yeah.
bourbons deep. Don't get on to me.
I
So
was just like, just spears of perdition, spears of perdition. I was like, was that a hiccup
Hey,
in the
instead
audio?
of the red thirst, fucking Gabe's on the bourbon thirst right now, okay?
hey, bro, they got lasers, tasers, and all kinds of lasers.
All kinds
So-
of lasers.
So that wraps up the Blood Angels.
What's their paint scheme?
They are red with black trim. Some of their special units, like the Sanguinary Guard, use a lot of gold with gold trim, like they're gold out like crazy. And that's about it, because they don't have anything like in 40K later on after the Black Rage hits and everything else. You get Death Company, but those don't exist yet. So everything's pretty much red with black trim right now.
Sanguinius's armor isn't red, right? He's
Nope,
gold.
he's in gold.
Okay.
And he has a cheetah on his back or a leopard.
Yeah,
What's the story behind that?
never really explained to my knowledge.
That's awesome. All right.
Probably knowing the primarchs is probably an animal he killed when he was in his crib. Like
Yeah.
the primarchs have some crazy off the wall stories about how they get things. Yeah, it's probably just decorative, or it was a gift from someone. Who knows? I'm sure there's a lore somewhere that somebody in the comments is going to be like, "Oh, you uneducated swine! It's the pelt of the first cat from." Yeah, I know it's going to happen, and I'm okay with it. I embrace it. Tell me where it came from. I don't read a
Bro,
lot.
the Emperor just fucking Bob Ross that thing. He just put it there and be like, "That's our little secret. We're not gonna tell anyone about it." And everyone's like, "What's
Right?
that? What is that?"
Yeah.
It's the lead cat from the planet Leoparditis.
Yeah, but all in all, they're a fun legion to paint because red's pretty mainstream. You can find that red everywhere. Black trim, it's pretty forgiving, and then gold trim. It's a pretty good paint scheme. It's pretty easy to pull off. So, guys, thank you for listening for this episode. This is a little bit outside of what we normally talk about. This is the wrap up for the first half of the Loyalists. This will be a 2-part episode, so please watch our next episode, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.